generally, whenever we talk about the senses, we talk about the five main senses: touch, taste, smell, hearing, and vision. But there are actually eight senses. So there's those five. There's also vestibular, which is also the balance and coordination. Um, there's proprioception, which is sort of being aware of your surroundings. Like, say if I'm trying to grab something, you have to be aware of where your arm placement is at all times. And then there's actually the eighth one, which is often neglected, and the one that I want to sort of lead up to talking a little bit more about. It's interoception. So interoception, it's often it has to do with similar things like with which the midbrain talks about, like like thirst, hunger. You can notice your heart pounding, and all that. And I have talked about how I have an autism spectrum disorder, and the autism spectrum disorder I have is sensory processing disorder. It's honestly something I wouldn't wish on my worst enemy, because it is something that definitely makes me feel so alone and unable to relate to other people. Um, I go through a lot of periodic breakdowns, and sometimes it's just I have to mask it, and I recognize I've been masking it for so long, and sometimes I just gotta let it out, and sometimes, and almost all the time, you're not in a healthy environment to let it out, and that's where the worst thing comes. Um, people with sensory processing disorder, we tend to lack the whole thing about having relationships. We feel lack of fulfillment in our lives, and yeah, it's a lot of isolation. People never seem to understand. We're always constantly on edge. Like, I mean, always on the fight flight response, or perhaps even like just needing so much space. Sometimes having to like spend maybe 7 or 8 hours alone, just being by ourselves. Uh, Things that have always triggered me are certain smells, some types of food, even like I always hated mushy bananas. I usually eat green bananas, and or I have them in smoothies, and like clothing. I think I mentioned clothing. Clothing always bothers me. Like I have to wear loose clothing, or uh, yeah, and I do have trouble with touching very hot objects. Like whenever I cook, even when I eat, I eat food mostly cold. And I plan to elaborate on this a bit more in future. Like, it is a very difficult subject to talk about, because it's ultimately what's caused a lot of problems in my life. I mean, people like because it was completely neglected by my parents, whom I lived with for 35 years. I had to kind of just accept the fact that I had a behavioral issue, but it's really not. But I will talk about it in future.